After 10 years of building my life in silence, my own family excluded me from our reunion, yet their faces turned pale the moment they saw the house. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. My name is Emily Carter, and I left my hometown 10 years ago. Back then, I was 19 and already tired of fighting for a place in my own family. My parents, Linda and George, never hid the fact that they favored my siblings, Megan and Ryan. It wasn't loud or dramatic, just constant reminders that I didn't measure up. If Megan got a B, it was celebrated. If I got an A, they barely looked at it. When Ryan wanted something, it showed up sooner or later. When I asked for help, I got lectures about being too independent for my own good. The final push came when college was brought up. My father sat us all down and talked about paying for Megan's tuition like it was a proud moment for the family. When I asked what the plan was for me, he shrugged and said, "You're resourceful. You'll figure something out." That was the moment I knew I could not keep living under their. I packed my things in 2 bags and left the same night. No one stopped me. No one even checked if I had somewhere to go. The first year was the hardest. I slept on a friend's couch for a while, then moved to a shared basement room with 2 other girls. I worked in a small diner during the day and cleaned offices at night. Every dollar I saved went toward rent and food. I didn't call home, and they didn't call me. I thought maybe my leaving would make them realize something, but nothing changed. With time, I learned new skills and took small risks. I found work with a construction crew that remodeled old houses. The pay wasn't much at first, but I watched everything, from how they measured walls to how they negotiated deals. When the boss trusted me enough to manage a project, I took the chance to prove myself. I didn't have anyone cheering me on, but I had something stronger, a promise I made to myself the night I left. I would never depend on them again. As the years passed, I stopped waiting for apologies or recognition. I focused on saving money, working hard, and staying quiet. I didn't tell anyone from back home where I lived or what I was doing. In their minds, I had disappeared. And in a way, I had. I built my life far from their opinions and expectations. They didn't know where I was, and I preferred it that way. I thought staying silent would keep me safe from the old hurt, and for a long time, it did. I never planned on going back, but life has a way of circling around when you least expect it. I had no idea that one day I still remember the night I left home. I was 19, sitting at the dining table while my father talked about Megan's college plan. He said he would cover all her expenses and that it was an investment in the right child. He didn't look at me when he said it. My mother just nodded like it was already decided. I asked if they planned to help me too, and my father barely paused before saying, "We can't afford everything. You're strong enough to manage on your own." That sentence stayed in my head for weeks. I went to my room, packed 2 bags, and walked out without making a scene. No one followed me. No one asked where I would sleep. I drove around for hours with no plan and ended up parking behind a grocery store. That first night in my car didn't feel real. I kept thinking someone would call, but my phone stayed silent. The next morning, I got up early and went to the diner where I had a part-time job. I asked the manager if I could take extra shifts. She didn't ask why. She just said yes. At night, I cleaned offices with a small company that paid in cash. I changed clothes in gas station bathrooms and kept most of my things in the trunk. Some nights were cold, and I would keep the engine running just to stay warm. Other nights, I didn't sleep at all. After a couple of weeks, one of the waitresses mentioned a cheap room someone was renting. It was small, with one window that didn't close right and a mattress that smelled like dust, but it was better than sleeping in the back seat. I paid the landlord in cash every Friday and tried not to think about what I left behind. My family almost never called. If they did, it was short and awkward. My mother once asked if I was doing all right, but before I could answer, she said she had to go. Megan called once to brag about her dorm and classes. She didn't ask where I was living. Ryan didn't bother with a single message. I learned quickly how to manage on my own. I bought cheap food, saved whatever I could, and ignored the loneliness when it hit too hard. There were nights I wanted to drive back, just to sleep in my old bed for a few hours, but pride stopped me every time. I told myself that if they didn't want me around when I needed them, they didn't deserve to see me when things got better. Every day back then was about survival. I didn't have time to cry or complain. I just worked, slept, and tried to stay invisible. What hurt most wasn't the struggle. It was knowing that none of them cared enough to check if I was eating or safe. They assumed I would figure it out, and I did, but not because of them. I got through those days with no help, no guidance, and no one waiting for me at the end of the day. That kind of silence changes you. Absence would bother them more than my presence ever did. 10 years went by, and I built my life far away from the Carters. It didn't happen overnight, but step by step, I found my footing. After working with the construction crew for a while, I learned enough to start taking small projects on my own. At first, I helped repair kitchens or remodel bathrooms in old houses. I charged less than most contractors just to get experience and build a name for myself. When I finally saved enough money, I bought my first rundown house. It wasn't big, and it needed almost everything fixed: wiring, flooring, walls, roof. I did most of the work myself to save on costs. I watched videos, asked questions on job sites, and made mistakes I had to learn from. When I sold that first house, the profit was more than I made in months of regular work. That sale changed everything for me. I bought another property soon after, then another one after that. Each time, I got smarter about what to fix, what to leave alone, and how to negotiate with buyers. I didn't use the name Carter for any paperwork or contracts. I went by Emily Hayes, a name no one in my family would recognize. I didn't want anyone connecting me to the past. I wasn't hiding out of shame. I just didn't want them showing up when things started to look good. As the years passed, people began to trust my work. Some saw the before and after photos and recommended me to others. I built a small team of workers who respected me and understood how I liked things done. No one asked about my personal life, and I didn't offer detail. Work became my focus, my protection, and in a way, my identity. I invested carefully, flipping one house at a time until I could handle more than one project at once. The money grew, not because I chased it, but because I stayed disciplined. I didn't buy expensive clothes or flashy cars. I drove an older pickup and wore the same boots until the soles thinned out. What mattered most was stability and control, two things I never had growing up. All that time, I stayed away from my family. I didn't visit for holidays, and I didn't send cards or updates. I knew how they operated. They cared only when there was something to gain. If I had come back too soon, they would have asked questions, not out of concern, but curiosity or judgment. So I stayed silent and let the distance grow. Sometimes I heard bits and pieces from people who still lived in my hometown. They said Megan got a good job through one of Dad's friends, and Ryan moved back home after dropping out of school. My parents were still the same, proud of their promising children and pretending I was a difficult memory. None of that surprised me. I built my life without expecting a single thing from them. I became someone they wouldn't recognize, someone who didn't wait for approval or permission. And I was fine keeping it that way. I didn't owe them explanations, visits, or updates. They made it clear long ago that. I found out about the family reunion by accident. One of my cousins, Jenna, still had my number from years ago. We weren't close, but we never had any problems with each other. She forwarded me an email that was sent to almost everyone in the family. The subject line was Carter Family Reunion, Mandatory Attendance. At first, I thought she sent it by mistake. Then I saw my name wasn't on the original list. I scrolled through the message and saw details about the date, time, and location. It was going to be held at a rented lodge near the town where I grew up. There were plans for food, photos, speeches, and even a slideshow. Names were listed for different tasks. Megan was in charge of organizing the event, Ryan was handling the barbecue, and some cousins were assigned decorations and desserts. My name didn't appear anywhere. At the bottom of the email, there was a short note from Megan to the rest of the family. She wrote, "I didn't include Emily because she probably wouldn't fit in anyway. She always made things uncomfortable." It wasn't a surprise, but reading it still hit something inside me. It wasn't anger at first, just a cold reminder that they still saw me the same way they did 10 years ago. Like I was someone unwanted, someone better left out. Jenna added a message when she forwarded it. She said she thought it was wrong not to invite me and that she wanted me to know what was happening. She didn't pressure me to come or ask for details. She just said, "You deserve to be included whether you go or not." It was a small sentence, but it felt more genuine than anything I'd ever gotten from my immediate family. I read the email twice before closing it. The words didn't surprise me, but they confirmed what I already knew. Nothing had changed. In their minds, I was still the outsider, the one who left, the one who didn't belong. They hadn't asked where I was, if I was okay, or how I was living. They just erased me like I had never existed. For a while, I sat in silence, thinking about the girl who used to hope they would notice her absence. That girl used to wonder if they missed her. Now all I felt was distance. I didn't cry or get angry. I just let the truth settle in. They built an event around family, and didn't consider me part of it. But underneath that calm, something else started to take shape. Not revenge, not sadness, just a decision. I didn't need their invitation to know my worth. They had no idea who I had become. They were still looking at the version of me they thought would fail. I didn't respond to Jenna right away. I just saved the email, closed my laptop, and went on with my day. But a thought stayed in the back of my mind. They might be done with me, but I wasn't done with what needed to be faced. I wasn't part of their plans, so I made sure they weren't part of mine either. When I finished reading the reunion email, I didn't get angry. I didn't cry or try to defend myself. I'd already spent too many years trying to prove my worth to people who never cared to see it. This time, I chose not to react with emotion. I chose to act with clarity. I didn't plan on showing up to argue or demand a seat at their table. I didn't want reconciliation. I wanted closure, my own kind, not the kind that needed their approval or acknowledgement. Going back wasn't about joining them. It was about finally facing the part of my past that no longer had power over. A few weeks before that email came, I had closed on a property near the edge of town. It was an old farmhouse that had been abandoned for years, sitting on several acres of land with a long driveway and a view of the hills. Most people wouldn't have looked at it twice when it was listed. The windows were broken, the paint was peeling, and the porch leaned to one side. But I saw potential the moment I stepped inside. I bought it under my company's name, Hayes and Company Restorations. No one connected that name to me or to the Carters. The house needed work, new floors, new roof, fresh siding, plumbing repairs, everything. But I'd flipped worse properties before. I hired my team, and we got to work. It wasn't about selling this one. It was the first house I bought knowing I would live in it. By the time I got that reunion email, the restoration was almost complete. The walls were freshly painted. The kitchen was modern but simple. The stairs had been rebuilt, and the porch was sturdy with clean white railing. The land around it was mowed and cleared, and the old barn had been repaired enough to use as storage. It wasn't a project anymore. It was home. No one in my family knew about it. They still pictured me the way they left me, struggling, forgotten, probably renting a small apartment somewhere far away. They never imagined I could build something bigger and quieter than anything they ever gave me. After sitting with the email for a day, I made up my mind. I would be in town the weekend of the reunion, not to attend their gathering or make a scene, but to be present in my own way. I didn't need an invitation or their acceptance. I just needed to walk back into that place on my own terms. I made a list of final things to fix before moving in: new light fixtures, curtains, furniture delivery. I arranged for everything to be ready the week of the reunion. There was a calmness in planning it. Not revenge, not spite, just certainty. They thought excluding me would keep me away. They thought I wouldn't fit in. The truth was, I had outgrown the place they tried to keep me in. And for the first time in my life, going back didn't feel like returning to them. It felt. The day of the reunion came quietly. I woke up early, packed a small bag, and drove into town like I was just running an errand. There was no rush, no second-guessing, no nervous thoughts. I knew where the event was being held, a rented hall near the edge of the main road, the kind people used for weddings and holiday parties. As I approached the building, I saw a long row of cars lined up along the parking lot and grass. I recognized several of them right away. My father's old silver SUV, Megan's dark blue sedan, and the tan minivan my parents bought for Ryan back when he couldn't afford his own. It was strange seeing them all in one place after so long, but it didn't shake me. I didn't stop. I just slowed down enough to make the turn past the entrance. The windows were open, and I could hear laughter, music, and voices spilling out into the air. A few kids were running around near the sidewalk. Some of my cousins were standing near the doors, holding drinks and chatting. I saw Jenna among them. She looked surprised for a moment when she spotted my truck, but she didn't look away. Two of my other cousins, Liam and Caroline, turned their heads as I passed. I could tell they recognized me even though it had been 10 years. One of them nudged the other, and they both whispered something while watching my car roll by. Their expressions weren't angry or mocking, more like shocked, maybe even curious. I saw Megan standing near the entrance, checking something on a clipboard. She looked up at the sound of cars passing. For a second, her eyes met mine. Her body went still, and I could tell she knew exactly who I was. But instead of reacting, she turned her head like she hadn't seen anything at all. She forced a smile at someone beside her and kept pretending I was invisible. I kept driving. My hands were steady on the wheel, and I didn't feel the need to slow down or make a scene. There was no reason to confront anyone, no reason to stop and ask why I wasn't invited. I had already accepted the answer years ago. As I passed the hall and drove toward the road that led to my farmhouse, I felt a strange kind of peace. Not joy, not sadness, just a calm stillness. Seeing them all there didn't hurt like it once would have. It just confirmed what I already understood. Their version of family had never included me. I didn't check the mirror to see who was still watching. I didn't need to. I knew whispers would start the moment I was out of sight. People would ask Megan if that was really me. Some would ask where I'd been, what I was doing, why no one told them I was coming back. Megan would either dodge the questions or pretend she didn't care. But I wasn't going there to be seen by them. I was going home, to the life I built without any of their help. And for the first time, driving past them didn't make me feel small. It made me feel free, like returning to something I had created for myself. After passing the event hall, I didn't go straight to the farmhouse. I stopped at a small cafe in town to grab a coffee and gather my thoughts. I wasn't hiding, and I wasn't rushing anything. About an hour later, I sent a simple message to Jenna, the cousin who had forwarded me the reunion email. I told her I was in town and that if she wanted to stop by my place after the event, she was welcome. I didn't give details or an address yet, just an invitation. She responded quickly, surprised but warm. She asked if she could bring her husband, Mark, and I told her that was fine. I also messaged Caroline, one of the cousins who saw me driving by. We'd never been especially close, but she was never cruel or dismissive like the others. I told her the same thing. If she wanted to visit after the reunion, she could. She replied with a short, "I'd like that." Thank you. I didn't invite anyone else. I didn't need a crowd. I only reached out to the ones who had never treated me like a problem. Word must have spread fast after that, because before long I noticed the shift. Jenna later told me that when she quietly mentioned she was meeting me afterward, a few relatives overheard. Someone asked if I was staying in a hotel. She said no, I had a place nearby. That was all it took. Curiosity started moving through the room like smoke. People began asking questions without asking directly. Someone wondered aloud if I still lived out of state. Another joked that I probably rented a little space somewhere. They said it like a safe assumption, like they were sure I hadn't built anything on my own. But as soon as someone mentioned seeing me drive past, others perked up. Liam told a group that I still looked different but confident. Caroline admitted she was going to see me later. That's when the tone shifted. Someone asked her where I lived now. She said I had a place not far from town. She didn't give details, but the idea alone stirred something. Megan overheard bits and pieces and tried to pretend she didn't care. She made a comment loud enough for people nearby to hear, something about how I always liked attention. But no one responded the way she expected. By the time the event was halfway through, the gossip had fully taken hold. Some wondered if I'd married and come back with someone. Others guessed I was renting a small house. One relative even asked if I needed help finding a job since I was back in the area. They still had no idea who I'd become. I didn't sit around imagining their reactions, but I knew how people in that family worked. The same ones who ignored me would suddenly remember I existed if there was something to be gained or judged. When the reunion wrapped up and people started leaving, I headed home to prepare. I didn't decorate or set anything up to impress anyone. The farmhouse already spoke for itself. All I did was open the gate, turn on the porch lights, and wait for them. As evening settled in, I was at the farmhouse getting things in order before Jenna and Caroline arrived. The lights in the main room were on, the porch lanterns glowed softly, and the driveway was clear. From the outside, the house stood calmly against the open land. White siding, dark shutters, a wide porch wrapping around the front and side, and a long, smooth driveway leading up from the road. Everything was quiet and still. I expected only the 2 people I had invited, maybe 3 at most. What I didn't expect was a line of familiar vehicles creeping up the driveway before they arrived. First, my parents' SUV appeared, followed by Megan's car and Ryan's van. Behind them were 2 more cars I recognized from cousins who hadn't been invited, but clearly decided to come anyway. No one had called, texted, or asked permission. They all just showed up. I watched from the front window as the cars slowed to a stop. At first, the doors didn't open. I could almost feel their confusion from inside the house. They had driven up expecting to find a small rental, maybe an apartment over a garage or a worn-down duplex tucked behind trees. Instead, they were staring at a house bigger and cleaner than anything they imagined I could own. The porch railings were newly painted, the wood polished, and the steps even and wide. The lawn was trimmed and lined with fresh gravel along the edges. The driveway looked like it had been poured only weeks ago because it had. Lighting along the path glowed without being flashy. Finally, the first door opened. My mother stepped out slowly, as if unsure she was in the right place. She looked at the house, then at my father, who just stared ahead with a puzzled expression. Megan climbed out next, adjusting her coat and squinting toward the windows. Her mouth moved, but I couldn't hear what she said. Ryan got out and stood beside the van, hands in his pockets, glancing around like he was trying to make sense of it all. 2 other relatives, an aunt and a cousin, got out of the last cars, both whispering while they took in the porch, the size of the house, and the land around it. No one walked forward right away. They just stood there, unsure if they should approach the front door or wait for someone to appear. I didn't rush out to greet them. I didn't wave or call to them. I let them take in the view and wonder how and why I was here. For years, they had pictured me as someone barely holding herself together, someone who would avoid being seen, someone dependent or struggling. They expected a place that matched the version of me they created in their heads. Instead, they were met with something that didn't fit their assumptions. A house I owned, a place I built, a life they had no hand in. The silence outside stretched longer than they expected. Some of them took a few steps closer, as if still trying to decide whether they had the right address. I stayed calm and waited. They came without asking, and now they had no choice but to stand on the outside of something they never believed I could have. Knock on the door from the few I had actually chosen. I waited a moment before stepping outside. When I opened the front door and walked onto the porch, every head turned toward me. The porch light fell across my face, and there was no doubt who I was. Their reactions were almost identical: shock, confusion, and silence. My mother was the first to react. Her mouth opened, but no words came out at first. She looked from me to the house, then back at me, like she couldn't connect the two. When she finally spoke, her voice shook a little. "Emily, you're here?" It sounded more like a question than a greeting. My father didn't say anything at all. He just stared, his eyebrows drawn together. He looked like someone who had walked into the wrong place by accident. For a man who always had an opinion, his silence was louder than anything he could have said. Megan straightened her jacket and put on a smile that didn't look real. She tried to sound casual, like she wasn't surprised. "Wow," she said slowly, looking around. "This is nice." Her eyes kept moving, searching for something that made sense to her. She focused on the porch railings, the new wood, the size of the house. Anything to avoid looking at me for too long. Ryan gave a short laugh, the kind people use when they don't know what else to do. He shoved his hands deeper into his pockets and said, "So, is this some kind of rental? You house-sitting or something?" His tone was half joking, half nervous. One of the aunts who had tagged along stepped a little closer and asked if someone I worked for owned it. Another cousin whispered, thinking I couldn't hear, "Maybe she's staying here for a bit until she finds a place." I didn't raise my voice or rush to explain. I just looked at them and spoke clearly. "I own this house," I said. "I bought it last year and restored it." For a moment, no one responded. My mother blinked like she hadn't heard me right. My father's mouth tightened, but he still didn't speak. Megan's fake smile faded, and she glanced at the windows and porch again as if searching for proof. Ryan looked at the driveway, then up at the roof, then back at me, still unsure what to believe. "You own it," Megan said finally, her voice thin. "Like you're renting to buy or?" "No," I said calmly. "It's paid for, and the restoration was done through my company." My mother's expression changed again, confused and uneasy. "Your company?" she repeated, like the word didn't belong to me. My father looked down at the steps, then at his hands, still avoiding my eyes. No one seemed to know what to say next. The quiet that followed wasn't peaceful, it was heavy. They were trying to fit this version of me into the image they'd kept for 10 years, and it didn't match. They weren't happy for me. They weren't proud. They were stunned and underneath it, uncomfortable. I didn't fill the silence with explanations or stories. I stood there, steady and unbothered, letting them sit in their own surprise. They came here expecting something small and forgettable. Instead, they had to face the fact that They stood there on the porch, still trying to process what they had seen and heard. After a few long seconds, Megan stepped forward like she suddenly remembered her role. She gave me a smile that didn't reach her eyes and said, "Well, we were actually going to invite you back in. You know, it's been a long time. We should all reconnect." I didn't move. "Reconnect," I repeated, calm and steady. "You all made it very clear years ago that I wasn't part of the family anymore." My mother lifted her chin slightly, trying to act gentle. "Oh, sweetheart, don't say it like that. Things just changed. But we're here now, aren't we?" I looked at her, unbothered. "You didn't come here to reconnect. You came because you thought I was living in some small place and wanted to see it for gossip." Ryan rubbed the back of his neck and tried to laugh again. "Come on, Em, let's not dig up old stuff. We're all adults now. Can't we just start over?" I shook my head. Starting over isn't the same as pretending nothing happened. You didn't forget me, you chose to leave me out. One of the cousins tried to speak up, saying they were just following what everyone else was doing. Another relative added, "We didn't think you'd want to come back anyway." I didn't argue. I simply answered, "You never asked. You assumed, and you made decisions for me without ever including me." The silence that followed was uncomfortable. No one could deny it. My father finally spoke for the first time since arriving. "Well, we're here now," he muttered, like that should fix everything. I nodded once. "Yes, you are. But this housewarming isn't for people who walked away. It's for people who were never ashamed of me." My mother's face tightened at the word ashamed. Megan blinked fast and looked at the others, trying to hide her annoyance. Ryan stared at the porch floor. I took a slow breath and kept my voice even. "You all made it clear I wasn't part of your lives. I accepted that a long time ago. But you don't get to show up now and act like nothing happened just because you're surprised by what I built." No one had anything to say to that. Their expressions shifted from shock to discomfort to a quiet kind of guilt. They wanted to come inside, look around, maybe take photos and tell others they were back in touch with me. But I wasn't going to give them that. I stepped back toward the door. "I wish you a good evening," I said plainly. "But this place isn't for people who only remember me when it benefits them." Megan tried once more, her voice tight. Emily, don't overreact. I looked at her and answered without emotion. I'm not overreacting. I'm done. And before anyone could say another word, I gently closed the door. Their surprised faces were the last thing I saw before the lock clicked. Inside, the house was quiet and warm. For the first time in years, I felt completely in control. No anger, no sadness, just peace. The life they left me out of had become one I was proud to own, and I didn't need their approval to keep it. Had built something without them, and in spite of them,